108,435. That is the number of jobs American employers announced they were cutting in January of 2026. 1 month, 108,000 people told their services are no longer needed. It was the worst January for layoffs in the United States since January of 2009, when the global financial system was on the verge of total collapse and the economy was hemorrhaging 600,000 jobs a month. That number is more than double what it was the previous January. A 118% increase in 12 months, and a 205% spike from just the month before. But here's the number that should terrify you even more than the layoffs: 5,306. That is how many new hires American companies announced they planned to make in the entire month of January. The lowest figure ever recorded. In 17 years of tracking, no January has ever been this quiet on the hiring side. The exit doors of the American economy are swinging wide open and the entrance is welded shut, and the timing could not be worse. Because the government agency responsible for telling us exactly how bad things are, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, could not release the January jobs report on time. Why? Because the federal government itself was shut down. The report that was supposed to come out on February 7th has been pushed to February 11th. The country is flying blind into what may be the most consequential labor market shift in a generation, and we do not even have the official data yet. Meanwhile, the private sector data we do have paints a brutal picture. A DP, which tracks private payrolls, says companies added just 22,000 jobs in January. 22,000. For context, the economy was averaging nearly 170,000 a month just 2 years ago. To keep up with population growth, we need somewhere around 70,000 a month just to break even. We are not breaking even, we are falling behind. And what makes this moment different from every other downturn in living memory is that nobody can agree on what is causing it. Is it the economy? Is it artificial intelligence? Is it the correction from years of reckless overhiring? Is it the tariffs? Is it the hundreds of thousands of government workers who were let go? The answer, as you are about to find out, is that it is all of them at the same time, converging into a perfect storm that no single policy, no single company, and no single worker can outrun. This is the story of how 2026 started with the worst labor market shock in 17 years, why it is probably going to get worse before it gets better, and what it means for anyone in this country who works for a living. To understand what happened in January, you have to understand where the damage was concentrated, because this was not a broad, indiscriminate wave of layoffs hitting every corner of the economy. It was a series of massive, targeted detonations in specific industries, specific companies, and specific cities. Transportation and logistics led the carnage with over 31,000 cuts. Almost all of that was one company, UPS. On January 27th, UPS announced it would eliminate up to 30,000 jobs and close 24 facilities as part of what CEO Carol Tomé called an accelerated plan to reduce its dependence on Amazon. For years, Amazon was the single largest customer UPS had. Now Amazon has built its own delivery network handling over 6 billion packages a year in the US alone, and UPS is left holding a workforce sized for a customer that no longer needs them. These 30,000 cuts came on top of 48,000 jobs UPS already eliminated in 2025. In 2 years, UPS will have cut nearly 80,000 positions. That is not a layoff, that is an amputation. The technology sector was next with over 22,000 cuts, and once again, a single company drove the number. Amazon announced 16,000 corporate job reductions on January 28th, just 1 day after the UPS news. These were not warehouse workers. These were corporate employees in AWS, in retail coordination, in Prime Video, in human resources. Amazon framed it as cutting bureaucracy, but the reality is starker. Amazon cut 14,000 corporate employees in October of 2025 and 16,000 more in January. That is 30,000 corporate workers in a single fiscal quarter, the largest corporate headcount reduction in Amazon's history. And where is the money going? Into AI and data centers. Amazon plans to spend $125 billion on capital expenditures in 2026, most of it on AI infrastructure. They are swapping salaries for servers. Then there is healthcare. Over 17,000 cuts in January alone, the highest for that sector since April of 2020, the peak of the pandemic. Healthcare was supposed to be recession-proof. You always need doctors, you always need nurses. But hospital systems are getting crushed between two forces. Inflation has driven up the cost of everything from labor to medical supplies, while reimbursement rates from Medicaid and Medicare have not kept pace. Hospitals are hemorrhaging money, and the people getting cut are the administrative and support staff who keep those systems running. And then there is Dow Chemical. On January 29th, Dow announced it would cut 4,500 jobs, about 13% of its entire workforce, as part of a restructuring it called Transform to Outperform. The CEO explicitly cited AI and automation as a core part of the strategy. But here is the part that did not make the headlines. Dow posted a $2.4 billion net loss in 2025. The AI framing is convenient. The financial distress is the actual driver. Geographically, the pain is not spread evenly either. Georgia absorbed over 31,000 cuts because that is where UPS is headquartered. Washington State took nearly 20,000 because that is where Amazon lives. Michigan saw nearly 20,000. Just 5 states accounted for 77% of all January layoffs. This is not a national wave, it is a series of localized earthquakes. And if you happen to live on one of those fault lines, the ground is crumbling beneath your feet. When you look at the reasons employers gave for cutting jobs in January, the picture becomes clearer and more disturbing. Contract loss was the single biggest reason, at 30,784 cuts, nearly all of which trace back to UPS losing Amazon's business. Market and economic conditions came next at over 28,000. Restructuring accounted for another 20,000. Closings, nearly 13,000. And AI, artificial intelligence, was cited for 7,624 cuts, 7% of the total. We will come back to that number because it is both smaller and more terrifying than it sounds. The broader economic backdrop tells a story of a labor market that is not crashing so much as it is freezing solid. Throughout 2025, economists described the job market as no hire, no fire. Companies were not expanding, but they were not cutting either. They were hoarding labor, clinging to workers because of the trauma of the post-pandemic labor shortage. If you let people go, the thinking went, you would never get them back. That strategy has now broken. The job openings data tells the story. In December of 2025, there were 6.5 million job openings in America, the lowest since September of 2020, down nearly 1 million from just 2 months earlier. For the first time since the pandemic recovery, there are now fewer job openings than there are unemployed workers. The ratio has flipped, and when that ratio flips, the balance of power shifts entirely. Employers no longer fear a talent shortage, they fear margin compression. And so the workers they hoarded become the workers they shed. Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller, who dissented from the Fed's decision to hold interest rates steady in January, offered a blunt assessment. He said the economy had essentially produced zero net private sector job growth in 2025, compared to an average of almost 2 million a year over the prior decade, and that this does not remotely look like a healthy labor market. The full year numbers back him up. The US economy added just 584,000 jobs in all of 2025, the weakest year for job creation outside of an official recession since 2003. The second half of 2025 averaged just 12,000 jobs per month. 12,000, against a break-even rate of roughly 70,000 just to absorb new entrants into the workforce. We are falling behind every single month, and the people looking for work are feeling it. The average job search now takes nearly 6 months. A quarter of all unemployed Americans have been out of work for more than 27 weeks, the highest long-term unemployment rate since the pandemic. Job seekers report sending 100, 200, sometimes 300 applications and hearing nothing back. 75% of resumes are filtered out by automated tracking systems before a human being ever sees them. Consumer confidence has cratered. The Conference Board's expectations index dropped to 65 in January of 2026, the lowest in over a decade. That index has a threshold at 80 points. Below 80 historically signals an incoming recession. It has been below 80 for 12 consecutive months. This subject matter can be hard to digest, but for most Americans, their personal financial situation is the hardest subject to approach and manage. But with the DollarWise budgeting app, you can finally take control. And since there's a free trial, you can see for yourself, get a full picture, automate your budget, Get powerful insights and set real goals that change your life. Stop with the overcomplicated budgeting apps like YNAB that no one can figure out. No more being told what to do with Ramsey's Every Dollar. End up being sold a mortgage with Rocket Money, and don't let private equity own you with Monarch. Take the change you need with a budgeting app that was built for people like you, by people like you. Go to dollarwise.app or click the link below to start your free trial. Meanwhile, the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index sits at 56, which is below the level recorded at the start of every single recession since 1978. And yet GDP is still positive. The stock market is still near record highs. Corporate profits are surging. This is not 2009. The banks are not failing. The housing market is not collapsing. And that paradox is exactly what makes this moment so dangerous, because the people at the top are doing fine and the people in the middle are slowly drowning, and the official metrics are not designed to tell the difference. A massive and underappreciated driver of the January layoff numbers is something that has nothing to do with AI, nothing to do with tariffs, and nothing to do with current economic conditions. It has to do with a hiring binge that happened 4 years ago. Between 2020 and 2022, when interest rates were at zero and stimulus money was flooding the economy, American companies went on the most aggressive hiring spree in modern history. They assumed the pandemic-era surge in digital demand was permanent. Remote work, e-commerce, cloud computing, all of it was growing so fast that companies believed the future had arrived early and they needed to staff up for it immediately. Meta nearly doubled its workforce in 3 years, from 45,000 to over 86,000. Amazon literally doubled, going from 798,000 to 1.6 million. Alphabet grew 60%. Microsoft grew 53%. They were all building for a world that did not arrive. When growth normalized, the reckoning came. Meta cut over 21,000 workers. Amazon shed tens of thousands of corporate roles. Mark Zuckerberg admitted publicly that he wrongly predicted pandemic e-commerce growth would persist. Stripe's CEO said the company was too optimistic about near-term internet growth. Zoom's CEO acknowledged they did not take time to analyze their teams properly. These are not vague corporate euphemisms, these are confessions. But here is the thing that most people miss. The correction is not over. None of these companies have returned to their pre-pandemic headcounts. Not one. Meta is still 75% above its 2019 level. Amazon is still double. Alphabet is virtually unchanged from its 2022 peak because for every person they laid off, they hired someone for an AI role. The so-called right-sizing was not a return to normal. It was a correction from an insane peak to a new, permanently higher plateau. And that plateau is still being adjusted downward. UPS is the perfect example. The company hired aggressively during the pandemic logistics boom when everyone was ordering everything online. Then volume normalized, Amazon built its own network, and UPS has now cut nearly 80,000 positions in 2 years. This is not a recession, it is a hangover. And like all hangovers, it is going to last longer than anyone wants. Now we get to the part everyone wants to talk about, artificial intelligence. In January 2026, AI was officially cited as the reason for 7,624 job cuts, 7% of the total. For all of 2025, AI was blamed for roughly 55,000 layoffs out of 1.2 million, about 4.5%. Since challengers started tracking AI as a distinct layoff category in 2023, the cumulative total is around 80,000 jobs. So is AI the job killer the headlines say it is? The honest answer is not yet. But the honest answer is also, it is worse than those numbers suggest, and the way it is happening is more insidious than a simple robot takes your job story. In January 2026, the Harvard Business Review published a study that surveyed over 1,000 executives worldwide. What they found should stop you cold. Companies are not laying people off because AI is doing their jobs. They are laying people off because they believe AI will eventually do their jobs. The study found that the majority of organizations that made AI-related workforce reductions did so in anticipation of what AI might deliver, not based on what it has actually delivered. 9 out of 10 firms announcing AI-justified cuts lack mature, tested AI applications that are actually ready to fill those roles. They are firing the humans now and hoping the machines catch up later. This is what analysts call AI washing. Deutsche Bank warned that AI redundancy washing will be a notable trend in 2026, where companies frame traditional cost-cutting as futuristic AI strategy because Wall Street rewards the narrative. If you announce layoffs and say it is because your business is struggling, your stock drops. If you announce layoffs and say it is because you are pivoting to AI, your stock rises. The incentive to blame the robot is enormous even when the robot does not exist yet. Look at Klarna, the buy now pay later company. Their CEO boasted publicly that AI could do all the jobs humans do after the company's headcount dropped by about 40%. Then he had to clarify on social media that they had made, quote, 0 layoffs due to AI, and that the reduction was actually a hiring freeze and normal attrition. And then Klarna had to quietly rehire human workers after AI-driven customer service quality tanked and customers revolted. Oxford Economics argued in January 2026 that firms are not replacing workers with AI on a significant scale, and that some companies may be trying to dress up layoffs as a good news story. A Wharton professor told CNBC there is very little evidence that AI eliminates jobs at the scale companies claim. Forrester research found that 55% of employers regret AI-driven layoffs and predicts half of all AI-attributed cuts will be quietly reversed. So if AI is being overstated as a direct cause of layoffs, why should you still be terrified? Because AI's real impact is not mass firings. It is silent compression. Companies are not announcing that AI took your job. They are just not posting the job in the first place. When someone quits, the position is not backfilled. When a team needs more staff, the headcount request is denied. The hiring freeze becomes permanent and no one ever announces it. This is the invisible layoff, and it is happening everywhere. The data on entry-level workers is especially disturbing. Entry-level job postings plunged 35% from January 2023 to mid-2025. A Stanford study found a 16% relative decline in employment for recent graduates in occupations susceptible to AI. Workers aged 22 to 25 in highly AI-exposed fields saw a 13% relative drop in opportunities. Computer science graduates now face unemployment rates comparable to fine arts majors. The IMF estimates that almost 40% of all jobs globally are exposed to AI-driven change. In advanced economies like the United States, that number rises to 60%. The World Economic Forum projects that 92 million jobs will be displaced by technology by 2030, offset by 170 million new jobs created, a net gain of 78 million. But that net gain requires massive reskilling, and no country on earth has a reskilling infrastructure built for that scale. So the AI story is not that the robots came and took all the jobs overnight. The story is slower, quieter, and in many ways more dangerous. It is a gradual thinning of the workforce from the bottom up and the middle out, happening behind closed doors and inside spreadsheets, where no one has to announce anything and no one gets counted in the layoff statistics. There are two policy-driven forces that contributed to the January numbers, and both of them carry political baggage. So let us lay out the facts and let the data speak. The first is the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, the initiative led by Elon Musk under the Trump administration to reduce the size of the federal government. By any measure, the impact has been enormous. In 2025, roughly 300,000 federal government layoffs, buyouts, and separations were announced, making government the single largest sector for job cuts, ahead of technology, ahead of healthcare, ahead of everything. Federal employment dropped by about 270,000 from January to November of 2025. That represents a reduction of more than 9% of the entire federal civilian workforce in less than a year, the largest peacetime government downsizing on record. Supporters of these cuts argue that the federal government was bloated and inefficient, that cutting waste returns money to taxpayers, and that private sector productivity will benefit from a leaner regulatory environment. Proponents point to historical precedent. The Clinton administration cut over 400,000 federal jobs in the 1990s and claimed $136 billion in savings. Critics counter that the cuts were chaotic, that essential services at the IRS, the VA, Social Security, and the CDC have been disrupted, and that personnel costs make up only about 4% of total federal spending, meaning you could fire a quarter of the entire federal workforce and barely dent the budget. The Cato Institute, a libertarian think tank hardly known for supporting big government, found that DOGE had no noticeable effect on the trajectory of spending, and that the federal deficit actually grew compared to the prior year. Take a moment and get some free, easy money. With a Chime checking account and my link, you can get $300 $350 when you set up direct deposit, and pair that with a nation-leading high-yield savings rate, there's literally no reason not to sign up right now. Chime.com/Caleb or link in the description below. What is not debatable is the economic impact. Washington, D.C. alone projects a $1 billion revenue loss over 3 years. Federal contractors in defense, IT, and consulting are seeing contracts canceled. And the ripple effects spread into every community where federal employees live, shop, eat, and pay taxes. The second policy force is tariffs. On April 2nd, 2025, the administration announced sweeping tariffs in what it called Liberation Day. In January 2026, tariffs were directly cited for only 294 layoffs, a tiny number. But the indirect effects are massive. Manufacturing has lost jobs every single month since those tariffs were enacted, shedding 72,000 positions between May and December of 2025. The Richmond Fed's CFO survey found that tariffs have been the #1 concern for chief financial officers for 4 consecutive quarters. When managers are uncertain about trade policy, they do not hire, they do not invest, they freeze. And a frozen economy is exactly what we have. Behind every statistic is a person who went to work on a Tuesday and was told not to come back on Wednesday. And the data on what those people are now facing is grim. We are living through what analysts have started calling a white-collar recession. Professional and business services lost 248,000 jobs over a 17-month stretch, a decline unseen outside of previous recessions. A vice chairman at the recruiting firm Korn Ferry put it bluntly, "We basically have a white-collar recession across the board." The Bureau of Labor Statistics had to revise away more than 500,000 previously reported jobs, with the majority of those phantom jobs concentrated in professional services, information technology, and financial activities. Jobs we were told existed that never actually did. What is different about a white-collar recession is who it hits. These are not minimum wage workers. These are people making $80,000, $100,000, $150,000 a year. They have mortgages, they have student loans, they have kids in daycare that cost $2,000 a month. They are the people who were told their entire lives that if they went to college, got a degree, worked hard, and climbed the corporate ladder, they would be safe. And now they are not safe. The implicit contract of the American professional class is being rewritten in real time. A phenomenon called the Great Stay has replaced the Great Resignation. The quit rate has dropped to about 2%, the lowest since 2016. Workers are not leaving their jobs because they are terrified of what is on the other side. A Manpower Group survey found that 64% of workers are now job hugging, staying in their positions not out of loyalty or satisfaction, but out of raw fear. Nearly half of all workers worry about losing their job to AI. 1 in 5 already knows someone who has lost a job to AI in the past year, and only 43% say they plan to even look for a new job in 2026, down from 93% in the prior year. The Great Resignation is dead. The Great Paralysis has taken its place. And there is a new term circulating among labor economists: forever layoffs. Instead of one large dramatic round of cuts that a company does and moves on from, what we are seeing is a constant low-level drumbeat of small layoffs. 50 here, 100 there, a team dissolved, a department restructured. No single cut big enough to make national news, but the cumulative effect is devastating. Workers live in a state of perpetual anxiety, never knowing if their team is next, never feeling secure enough to spend, to invest, to plan. This is what economic stagnation looks like at the human level. It is not a crash. It is a slow, grinding erosion of everything that makes people feel stable. If this were only happening in the United States, you could blame American policy, American companies, American problems. But it is not. This is a global phenomenon, and the drivers differ by country, but the direction is the same everywhere. Germany is living through its deepest industrial crisis since World War II. GDP has contracted for 3 consecutive years. The automotive sector alone shed over 55,000 jobs in 2025. Volkswagen is cutting 35,000 by 2030. Mercedes-Benz 16,600. Bosch 5,500. The driver there is not AI, it is Chinese electric vehicle competition, astronomical energy costs, and the collapse of export markets. The United Kingdom saw 124,000 redundancies in a single quarter, the most since the pandemic. Unemployment rose to 5.1%, with a national insurance hike driving nearly a third of businesses to plan headcount reductions. A Bank of England survey found only 1% of firms cited AI as a reason for layoffs. The problems in Britain are old-fashioned: taxes and costs. Canada's unemployment hit 7.1% in mid-2025, the highest since 2016 outside the pandemic, driven largely by American tariffs crushing Canadian manufacturing that depends on US demand for nearly 40% of its output. The IMF's managing director Kristalina Georgieva said at Davos in January 2026 that AI is impacting the labor market like a tsunami and that most nations and businesses are ill-prepared. The OECD reports that the share of firms using AI jumped from 14% in 2024 to 20% in 2025. The wave is building, and no country has a seawall. So, where does this go? There are 3 realistic paths from here, and none of them are painless. Path 1 is the optimistic case. The painful cuts of early 2026 produce a leaner, more efficient corporate sector. AI adoption drives a genuine productivity boom that eventually creates new categories of work we cannot imagine today, just as the internet did in the 1990s. Displaced workers migrate into the AI ecosystem, into the physical trades that cannot be automated, into healthcare roles that machines cannot fill. The economy bends but does not break. This path requires massive investment in reskilling, patience from policymakers, and a degree of economic luck that historically does not come on command. Path 2 is the grind. No recession officially arrives, but the labor market stays frozen for the rest of 2026 and into 2027. Unemployment drifts up to 5 or 5.5%. Companies continue to cut in small increments, never enough to trigger alarm, but always enough to keep workers terrified. Hiring stays weak. The gap between those who own assets and those who sell their labor grows wider. This is the world of the K-shaped recovery, where the top of the economy soars and the middle slowly sinks. Most forecasters think some version of this is the most likely scenario. Path 3 is the worst case. A recession trigger, whether from a trade war escalation, a financial shock, or a sudden collapse in consumer spending, pushes an already fragile labor market over the edge. Companies that have been hoarding labor finally break and release tens of thousands of workers at once. Unemployment spikes past 6%. The Federal Reserve cuts rates aggressively but finds that monetary policy cannot fix a structural transformation. Displaced white-collar workers flood into lower-wage service jobs, pushing down wages across the entire economy. AI adoption accelerates as companies double down on automation to survive the downturn. The recovery, when it finally comes, creates different jobs in different places for different people, and millions never find their way back to where they were. January 2026 was not a glitch. It was not a one-month anomaly driven by a couple of big companies making headlines. It was a signal that the American labor market is undergoing a structural transformation unlike anything we have seen since the 1980s, when automation hollowed out the manufacturing heartland and created the Rust Belt. But this time, it is not factory workers on the assembly line. It is the college-educated professionals sitting in a corporate office making 6 figures who believe that degree, that experience, that LinkedIn profile made them irreplaceable. The implicit promise of the knowledge economy was that if you worked with your mind instead of your hands, you would be safe from the machines. That promise is being broken. The companies cutting jobs are not failing. They are posting record profits. The S&P 500 is near all-time highs. Amazon is spending $125 billion on AI infrastructure while cutting 30,000 workers. This is not an economy in crisis. This is an economy being reorganized, and the people being reorganized out of it do not have a clear path back in. 108,435. That was January. February is underway, and the January jobs report, delayed by a government shutdown, will not arrive until February 11th. When it does, we will finally know whether the announced cuts have translated into actual, measurable job losses across the economy. But the people who already lost their jobs do not need a government report to tell them what they already know. The ground is shifting. And for millions of Americans, the question is no longer whether the storm is coming. It is whether anyone is building a shelter.